You are now watching Tales from the Grid.
I think the fact that it could well be the last season of the show does add a certain something to the experience of watching it. And we didn't know when we were writing it that that would be the case. We didn't find out until May this year when the announcement was made that Power Rangers was leaving New Zealand, that it was all over. I mean, Power Rangers leaving New Zealand is kind of a corporate euphemism for we've got no plans to continue with the show and it's too expensive to keep paying for everything to be stored in warehouses in New Zealand rather than we're going to move production somewhere else.
There were already rumors going around about the franchise ending, so when this news came out, it definitely signaled that it may actually be a wrap for Power Rangers as they've been in New Zealand since 2002. Power Rangers boosted the New Zealand economy due to the amount of the actors and production crew being New Zealand natives. So by leaving the country entirely, it meant that big changes were happening.
We knew that the Entwistle show was somewhere in development, but it's still at very early stages as far as I know. And, they're nowhere near casting. I mean, one draft script might have shown up somewhere. Realistically, looking at how long these things take, now the writer's strike is over, they'll be back into development. I don't think they'll have finished writing a series until, months into next year, because these things take a lot of time.
Correct.
And the earliest they could possibly go into production would be the end of next year. So I would say mid to late 2025 would be earliest to expect the next version of the show. And that's assuming that Hasbro have the kind of will and the commercial desire to spend the huge amount of money it's going to cost to make that show.
The production delay due to the writers' strike didn't help the reboot because some writers can only allot a certain amount of time per project, and delays could mean they now have to pick and choose which projects they will keep and which they will drop. Hasbro being funny with the money when it came to Power Rangers meant that the future of any Power Ranger project was going to be uncertain, as Hasbro may cancel the project rather than pay a writer more money to not leave.
Power Rangers suddenly stopped being a priority at the beginning of this year,
Right.
with the new CEO is kind of redefining what the company was going to focus on, and it's very hard to get enthusiasm, I think, within a big corporation for something that requires a big outlay of money when it's very low on your list of corporate priorities. So it's all those kind of political, political corporate issues that have been what have put the stop to Power Rangers this year.
The previous CEO was a supporter of Power Rangers as he witnessed their ascension in the 90s and had plans to recreate and expand that momentum. Unfortunately, he passed away before those plans could come to light. The new CEO implemented a business strategy known as Blueprint 2.0, which essentially meant they cut time, money, and resources from their less profitable brands so they could give it to their more profitable brands.
A year ago, you guys were developing the suits. You designed them in a way in order to articulate for the production of these figures.
That's correct. Back then, there was a definite plan to make the figures. In fact, the whole reason the suits were changed was because of the toy production, because obviously toy sales is a big part of Power Rangers revenue. Right. I don't know what the plan is now with toys, whether there will or there won't be Cosmic Fury figures. That's in the hands of Hasbro.
The reason why the suits look so bland is because Hasbro wanted to simplify the toy manufacturing process. Not only did the suit designs get a lot of backlash, but the figures were never actually made as the Lightning Collection went on hiatus. So Hasbro put Cosmic Fury through hell and back for nothing.
There was a mass series of layoffs early this year.
Right.
Basically, nearly all the people within Hasbro who worked on Power Rangers were laid off. So that's one of the reasons why the promotion and marketing has been so thin for Cosmic Fury, because the entire team were pretty much gone. And the same goes with the brand team. Basically it's tumbleweeds as far as focus on Power Rangers is concerned.
It was apparent that there was a lack of consistency within the Power Rangers brand team, as we would see different hosts in the live streams, people from other brand teams, or what looked to be random staff members. It became a running joke about how absent the Power Rangers social media accounts became, even around the 30th anniversary. Both the Twitter and Facebook accounts haven't posted in over a year, not a new product release or an obligatory Happy Holidays post anywhere to be seen.
We were just sad that it was only 10 episodes because we had to compress the stories from 20 into 10, which I think affects the pacing within Cosmic Fury. It does feel a bit rushed, and some of the story elements feel a bit once over lightly. I think everyone knew, because it was only 10 episodes and because of the messages we'd been getting, that this was likely to be the last hurrah, and that made it, that gave everyone an even stronger sense of, well, let's show them that we can be fantastic and go out on a high note rather than just fade away.
I wonder how the original 20-episode storyline differed from what was released, because Cosmic Fury was a bit lackluster. I think due to the season getting shortened, the writers decided to leave their mark by including a bunch of firsts, instead of writing a decent story that fits within a 10-episode time frame.
Originally created for 20-plus episodes, and you guys had to condense it down to 10 due to Netflix rule of only having 10 episodes. That's been the order.
It wasn't Netflix. That wasn't the reason for it. It was always going to be on Netflix, and Netflix were are happy with the 20 episodes. It was a board decision within Hasbro not to spend the money on the 20-episode season, and it became a Netflix original, which meant that Netflix would pay for the whole thing, but they would only do that for 10 episodes rather than the 20. So at the end of 2021, just before Christmas, when the green light failed, we thought, oh no, it's all over, it's not going to happen. And then after the holiday break in January of 2022, we found out that Netflix had stepped in and that they would fund a 10-episode season, but that's all there would be. And also Once and Always, because that had been sold to Netflix as part of the package.
Hasbro is making it clear that they are not trying to spend more money on Power Rangers. If it wasn't for Netflix, we wouldn't have gotten a 30th anniversary special, let alone a season 30. Based on previous production budgets, Power Rangers costs about $940,000 per episode. If we count Once and Always as 2 episodes due to the length and combine that with Cosmic Fury's 10 episodes, Netflix possibly spent at least $11.3 million to produce both. At $940,000 per episode, Once and Always, and a full 22-episode season of Cosmic Fury could have cost around $22.5 million to produce. Hasbro seems to have no faith that they'll get a return on their Power Ranger investment, to the point that they're just letting other companies produce Power Ranger products so they can collect licensing fees. Hasbro could sell Power Rangers, but they spent $500 million to buy it, and investors aren't going to want to hear that they sold Power Rangers at such a great loss.
So how did you guys finesse that being its own special?
It was always going to be its own standalone special. Hasbro wanted it to be different to the kids series. They wanted something that was a bit older skewed, that was made with the adult fans and lapsed fans of the show in mind. That was what was behind Once and Always. The tricky thing was, though, that the brief changed all the time that we were getting from Hasbro. It was originally meant to be a family show with lots of humor and quite comedic. And that was written, and that's where monster characters like Retrono came from with his nostalgia bombs, which would send everyone back to the 90s. And then they changed their mind, and they wanted something much grittier and more adult skewed. So we completely went back to the drawing board and wrote a different story. And then gradually, one by one, we found that various legacy Ranger actors were not available or not interested. And every time another actor fell over, we'd have to rewrite again. And then Hasbro decided that it was all looking too dark, and they wanted something that would work for families to view, parents watching with kids. So again, we had to go back to the drawing board. We kept the basic story, but we changed the tone of it a bit to lighten things up. So, when you're making something for a client, you do what the client asks you to do because they're the person paying for it. But, right. It kept changing shape and changing form Once and Always, right through into the edit. Because I think no one was really sure what they wanted, and they were quite nervous about it. And remembering that for Hasbro, MMPR is the goose that lays the golden eggs, because of the sheer numbers of people who used to watch MMPR back in the day. like most people who aren't fans of the show, you ask them what Power Rangers is, and their mind will automatically go to MMPR and those characters, because that's when it was a global phenomenon.
Once and Always is celebrating the 30th anniversary of a kid's show, so I can see why someone would suggest making Once and Always kid-friendly as to stick to their roots. On the other hand, kids who watched the show when it originally aired are now at least 30 and up and may be interested in Once and Always being more mature. Another suggestion could have been to make Once and Always family-friendly, so it could entertain both children and adults. I would prefer to have future Power Ranger seasons to be more mature because the current storylines that cater to a younger demographic is uninteresting. Once and Always definitely captured my attention more than Cosmic Fury did. I wouldn't mind having a season 31 that was a continuation of the Once and Always storyline.
That seems to be an issue with Power Rangers. They always try to catch the lightning in the bottle that struck back in the 90s that doesn't translate into today's world.
It never ever will, and that's the problem. Is that in the 90s it was new and there was nothing like it, and it hit the zeitgeist. And you can only ever be new once with a property like Power Rangers. So rather trying to recreate whatever the formula was back then, I think it's better to just keep evolving and developing and keeping the show you're making modern, rather than trying to tick all the check boxes that were relevant back in 1993, but the world has moved on since then. And a show that was made in 1993, or a show that is without irony trying to replicate something from 1993, is not going to resonate, I don't think, with the modern audience. And that's been one of the problems with Power Rangers over the last few years. It's tried too hard to be something from the past rather than moving forward into the future.
I agree that Power Rangers is having a bit of an identity crisis because they've been trying to repeat the success of MMPR, but unfortunately the world isn't the same as it was in 1993. I joined via MMPR and was still into Power Rangers until Mystic Force. I would just wait for the previews of each new season to come out, and none of them interested me enough to watch. I eventually watched all the seasons and noticed that the quality of writing had declined a lot. That's when someone will say it's a kid's show, which is the go-to statement to excuse or justify why the show lacked in certain aspects. As technology became more advanced and cheaper to access, children stopped playing with toys and started playing on their parents' phones and tablets. The term iPad kid became a thing due to how many parents would use their devices as an electronic babysitter to entertain and distract their kids, so parents didn't have to constantly watch their own children. This became a norm in modern culture where kids are just constantly using their devices to access entertainment. This problem affects Power Rangers because their business model relies on toy sales to generate most of its revenue, as the show is merely a 20-minute commercial to advertise their products. The more recent Power Ranger seasons have been written for a child audience, which is futile because the audience they're writing for may watch the show, but they don't buy or play with toys. So even if the viewership of the more child-friendly seasons is higher, it doesn't matter because Power Rangers gets its money from toys, not views. So it's almost like they're writing for an audience that doesn't even serve them. Although I wasn't watching the more kid-friendly seasons, I was still buying the toys here and there because I grew up when toys generated all the entertainment you needed. The 1993 business model doesn't work on modern children, so either the show has to mature and speak to an older audience that has disposable income to buy products and merch, or it has to stop relying on toy sales and switch to a business model that relies on viewership.
Hopefully we get this reboot.
I really hope it happens, and I'm really looking forward to seeing what they do with it. And I expect it will be quite different from any sort of Power Rangers that people know. I imagine that it will be standalone. It won't rely on canon or lore from all 30 years of existing Power Rangers. It will be a hard reboot, and that will confuse some people, but people who watch it with an open mind will hopefully get carried along with the new show. And the main purpose of it, I think, is to generate new audiences for Power Rangers and to make Power Rangers cool again in a general public mind. I mean, it's always been cool with fans of the show, but that's not the audience that Hasbro want to reach. They want to reach a broad general audience. And I actually think if anyone can make it cool, Jonathan Entwistle is the right person for it. There are shows that have been reinventions of well-known franchises, and some of them have been very successful. And this one, I think, will be extremely well written and constructed, which, Entwistle and Jenny Klein are absolutely the right people to do. So I'm really looking forward to it.
Cobra Kai serves as an example of how to transition a product originally made for children into a mature version while appealing to original and new fans. Cobra Kai started as a show on YouTube where the storyline picks up 34 years after The Karate Kid, and it was bought by Netflix, who recently just released Cobra Kai's 6th season. Through quality writing, Cobra Kai was able to attract a modern audience, be acquired, and increase its budget that allowed it to be a bigger and better show. If Power Rangers follows the same template, it could experience a similar success. Hasbro has to serve the audience that'll help sustain their business.
For the suit designers, were they made by Plex or were they made in-house?
They were made in-house. The designs were very much a collaboration with Hasbro toy and brand people. Like, there were lots of drafts in the designs. And a lot of the feedback was about making them more streamlined to mold and produce as toys. The original designs had a lot more texture on the costumes and interesting shapes, but those all got smoothed out in the consultation process. They were made in-house, same as the evil blue Ollie suit and various other costumes that you saw. The things that were made by Toei in Japan were Bagilia and Squilia. They were fabricated in Japan. We didn't work with Plex. I'd never heard of Plex until the complaints about the Cosmic Fury suits started appearing online. I understand they are connected with Bandai, which would make it very difficult for us to work with them. But our in-house people have made the Ranger suits for as long as I've been working with the show. We had 3 or 4 warehouses full of sets and props and costumes that had to be either sent to landfill, destroyed, or returned to Hasbro.
That sucks. It would have been such a great opportunity to pretty much auction off these suits.
The suit reveal was met with immediate backlash. By putting this suit out, Hasbro is showing where they stand with the franchise. Because they were so focused on selling products, they made changes to the show to optimize toy production. I don't think the suit designs were a collaboration at all. I think Hasbro told everybody it's their way or the highway. I wonder what percentage of suits were thrown away versus how many made it to the eventual auction.
Zato's Ghost Ranger helmet. Since y'all only get like one mold of the helmets from Toy, is that why his helmet is still red and the rest of his suit is white, or was it always planned for his helmet to just remain red?
It'll remain red because we only had one of them, and it would be for scheduling purposes.
I didn't mind the red helmet with the white suit because it reminded me of the Shishi red Orion suit from Q-Ranger. This would have been a nice way for Zato to transition into the Dino Fury White Ranger. Zato could have been the Ghost Ranger who was back for a limited time, and he could have transferred the Red Ranger power to Amelia during some important battle.
Something that has to do with the Dark Ranger. Now, we know he was introduced from one episode as like a spy. Was there any reference there to maybe being a potential Dark Ranger special?
No. Becker and Alan always regretted not being able to have the Dark Ranger in Dino Charge because for various permissions reasons, the suit wasn't available then. And so they really and they knew that fans liked the suit, so they wanted to find a way of bringing the character into Cosmic Fury. And also, they were a big fan of Heckle. This was before my time on the show, so I don't have any memory of Dino Charge because I didn't work on it. And so really it was about completing the circle and giving him a substantial cameo. But no, there was no intention to make a special or do anything else. And also, there have been comments about the red on the helmet not being correct as compared to the comics or the Sentai use of the suit. But we don't read the comics, so there's no consultation between Boom Studios and the TV show, basically, which is why we've always considered that they are their own separate canon. It's just that the comics and the TV show evolve completely separately. There's no communication between the comics people and us. I haven't seen the comics. I don't read them. The only time I've actually taken the comics into consideration was when we were designing the Morphin Master suits for Dino Fury, when we looked at how the comics had handled them, and they were definitely an influence on the design there, because we didn't want to do something completely at odds. But it was adapted for TV rather than a complete literal copy of the comics designs.
I didn't mind the Dark Ranger making an appearance because I like his suit design, so seeing him was a welcome surprise. There's some Sentai villains I would like to see in Power Rangers, like Don Armage. I like the way he looks. The comics are a different canon from the show, especially because of how some writers will create a Power Ranger series based on how they feel Power Rangers should be. After a certain point, the comics don't matter because some stories are so derivative that they are only related to Power Rangers because of their title.
Can we talk about Zato?
Yeah, go for it. I'll be limited in what I can say, but absolutely, ask away.
I personally feel from your interactions with the fandom and like the complaint that has been brought up about Zato, I don't know if you don't understand where fans are coming from with their complaint, or if you just don't agree with it. So, saying things on Twitter, tweeting and stuff is totally different from actually hearing somebody speak their piece on a situation. So, I wanted to hear what you had to say on the topic of Zato and, the obvious complaint that has been going on.
I have read, and I think I understand the criticisms that from some people towards the depiction of Zato in Cosmic Fury. It's not my place as a white man to comment on whether the criticisms are accurate or not, or even to defend the depiction. I think that once people have seen it, then they can make up their own minds as to whether it's valid or a demotion or a promotion or whatever the criticisms are. But I can understand how it feels, particularly with Zato being not there for pretty much for the first 3 episodes, and for the fact that he is kind of an outsider with the rest of the Ranger team, and that he has very limited powers. At the end of the season, he ascends to become a Morphin Master, which is something that has never happened to a Power Ranger before and is far more powerful than any other Ranger could ever be. And all I can talk about really is the intention behind what we were doing rather than how it is perceived. Everyone has their own perfectly valid response to what they're watching and how they feel about it. When I was responding online to people who hadn't seen Cosmic Fury, saying that because Amelia had become Red Ranger, Zato had been demoted, and I was saying he hasn't been demoted, but I can't tell you what happens because it would be a spoiler. In my head, we had made Zato the most powerful Ranger ever by promoting him a Morphin Master, and his trajectory from the very end of Dino Fury was always towards the end of Cosmic Fury. But having said that, I hear and respect the criticisms that have been leveled at it, and I can't really argue because it's not my place to do so. People will take from the show what they choose to take from it.
It doesn't necessarily stem from the fact that Zato is becoming a Morphin Master. I personally don't look at becoming a Morphin Master as a demotion, but because of what the Red Ranger represents to Power Rangers, that is more so the issue that fans have. It was never about Amelia being female or Amelia actually becoming a Red Ranger, but this is one of the few instances in Power Rangers where a member of this team is now replacing another member of this team as the Red Ranger. And again, because of what the Red Ranger represents to Power Rangers, it's a heavy task. And in my opinion, obviously Hasbro and everyone working on Cosmic Fury knows this because Amelia is becoming the Red Ranger. it's a significant moment. It's a big moment. So it's like, yeah, Zayto's becoming a Morphin Master, but for the casual audience that people that, Hasbro wants to target, they don't know who the Morphin Masters are. The Morphin Masters have only become a relevant thing in the last 3 years, but the Red Ranger has always been a constant, and it's always been the figurehead of the brand as a whole. So putting that on Amelia is great. Nobody is arguing that, I don't think, and I don't think anybody could contest that. And I personally feel like from watching Cosmic Fury, she did a good job as Red. It was earned. It was deserved. It's just more so the argument of Zayto, like him going from Red Ranger to Zenith Ranger, this color we've never seen before, and he's still on the team despite where things end up. It feels like he gets sidelined, and we've had seasons that have had 2 Red Rangers, and the fact that we couldn't do something like that feels like, the whole purpose is to put all of the Red Ranger focus on Amelia, which is, again, that's okay. I guess for some fans, it made it feel like we were shortchanged, and that was the whole complaint. I know people took it in different avenues and tried to make different complaints, but in my opinion, it's not about him becoming a Morphin Master. I get what the Morphin Masters are supposed to represent narratively, but the complaint goes beyond the narrative. It goes beyond what the story is telling. It goes beyond it's about the representation and what the Red Ranger holds and how significant he is. And, I had a space earlier where I talked about, why wasn't Zayto just a White Ranger? His Ghost Ranger suit is white. It would have felt like more of a natural evolution. And white is the only other color that has been treated as an equal to the Red Ranger from a production promotion standpoint, even in Sentai, So if Zayto would have been white, it would have felt different, but we're getting thrown a new color. It almost feels like, this being a season with so many firsts, it's like, oh, he's just getting a new color as a consolation prize because he's not red anymore. So there's a lot of avenues and ways for fans to look at this, but, I do appreciate your response. I think that I do think that it could ease a lot of fans' nerves the way you presented your argument.
Thank you. I understand the criticism absolutely, and I can't really comment on it or defend it other than to say the intentions were based on love of the character. Also, bear in mind the word zenith means at the apex or the highest point of something. So, what we were doing in terms of the narrative, which is different to the optics, I quite understand that, was really out of respect for the character. Something else that's interesting from what you just said was that we always wanted Zayto to be the White Ranger. We called him White Ranger internally when he came back at the end of Dino Fury, and we wanted him to be White Ranger through Cosmic Fury, but Hasbro said no. And the reason for that was that calling a black character White Ranger might be perceived as being divisive or offensive to some. So we couldn't go down that path.
I have a quick
That's
question.
crazy.
Oh my
Seeing
God.
as how that was.
Hold on.
You're out of pocket.
I have a question.
I'm flabbergasted.
Hold on, Simon. I know you still fresh to the show. We literally have a black White Ranger, and I know it ain't on you, but that's crazy as hell because Haley was literally the last White Ranger, and she's a black woman from New Zealand at that.
I know. I worked with her. I directed Ninja Steel. So yeah, I know that. But what happens within a company like Hasbro is that they will replace their brand people who are actually the client for Power Rangers every 2 or 3 years. So every time a new team comes on board, they want to put their own mark on something, and improve it in their minds. So I worked with 3 or 4 completely different sets of people at Hasbro over the time I was working on the show, all with their own quite different ideas. And with the people who were dealing with the development period of Cosmic Fury, this was something that they felt very strongly about. So it was one of those things that I tried to push back, but the answer was no. And I agree, it's ridiculous. I come across some really ridiculous things. For example, Morphin Master Z writing a Z on the side of the mountain with his staff to demonstrate his power, and Izzy thinking it looks more like an N, was a direct reference to some notes we got from Hasbro about the costume design, where they were concerned that if he was lying down, the Z on his staff would look like an N, and that would be confusing to the audience. It's that kind of stuff that you deal with on a day-to-day basis. So we made a joke of it in the actual script. But sometimes you're left completely on your own, and other times there's a lot of hands-on control, and particularly in areas that might be perceived as being sensitive. Another example of this is that Robo Rita's mask design, like the face, went through about 4 or 5 different drafts because Hasbro were concerned it looked too Japanese, and they were accusing us of being of cultural appropriation. And I tried to argue that the entire show is cultural appropriation if you're going to follow that argument, because nearly all the designs in the show are actually Japanese or from Japan, but that didn't wash either. So those are the kinds of tricky pathways that we have to navigate.
The obvious complaint can be perceived in many ways. It looks like Zato was pushed to the side, so Amelia can be the Red Ranger. Others say that the writers pushed a black man to the side to make room for a white woman. Simon has been an open book about Hasbro and their nonsense, so him now saying he'll be limited on what he can say on this topic, and how he can't really comment on the situation makes the skeptic in me believe that there may be some truth in the accusations regarding the Amelia Red Ranger situation and his hand in it. Simon keeps insisting that Zato was promoted to Morphin Master, and now he's the most powerful Ranger ever, which sounds good, but in reality it was quite lackluster. Zato disappeared in the beginning of the first episode and didn't reappear until episode 4. After being found, he could barely help the team because using his very limited powers drained him to the point where he had to take long rests. So it's like he's back, but he's useless. I think the idea of Zato becoming a Morphin Master was an afterthought thrown in to serve as a shield from the potential backlash of sidelining him to make Amelia the Red Ranger. The Morphin Masters shown in Dino Fury are a group of powerful but powerless beings that the writers try to retcon into other seasons to fast-track them into importance. The Red Ranger has been the face of the franchise since the first Sentai season. It's pretty much an established rule that the Red Ranger is the team leader. This has been one of the most consistent things across almost every team, so being the Red Ranger is a big deal. Part of the marketing and promotion was heavily centered around Amelia being a Red Ranger. But the funny thing is that you can tell the writers really wanted to tout Amelia as the first female Red Ranger, but she's not. There has actually been 2 female Red Rangers before her. So what do the writers do? They go out of their way to force a first title on Amelia by saying she is the first full-series female Red Ranger leading a team of Rangers. The writers really jumped through all those hoops to high-five themselves for doing something momentous, but technically Charlie from SPD is the first full-series female Red Ranger leading a team of Rangers, but SPD focused on B-Squad, therefore making Amelia the first full-series female Red Ranger leading a team of non-evil Rangers. Then on top of that, I don't consider 10 episodes to be a full series, and of those 10 episodes, she was only the leader for 8 of them, so Amelia is the first almost full-time female Red Ranger leading a team of non-evil Rangers in a miniseries. I'm not giving the writing team credit for something that was already done 18 years prior. The self-patting on the back for the groundbreaking moments in Cosmic Fury makes me feel like after picking up the hints that Cosmic Fury was going to be the last season, the writers decided to include certain themes in Cosmic Fury not to show allyship with certain groups out of genuine solidarity, but to claim they were the first Power Ranger season to include such themes. Zato should have became the Dino Fury White Ranger, which would have made sense because being a White Ranger is considered as a promotion from Red Ranger due to Tommy's leadership as the White Ranger. It's ridiculous that Hasbro, or the brand team at the time, rejected having Zato be the White Ranger because the actor playing him is black and they believed calling a black character the White Ranger could be offensive to some. This lets me know that even though they claim to celebrate diversity, there must not be a single black person anywhere close to the team, because I'm pretty sure a black person would have told them they're making something out of nothing. As a black person myself, I actually find the brand team's actions to be offensive and hypocritical. They are holding back an entire group of people from being a certain ranger color due to their own personal beliefs. Isn't that what they're supposed to be fighting against? And the brand team thinking that the black audience seeing a black actor who is playing a white ranger be called the White Ranger would cause an upset within the community is belittling. These situations happen when people who believe they are doing the right thing don't actually do their due diligence to see if their beliefs are accurate. Actions born from misinformed views can have the opposite of the desired effect. To make the situation even worse, we've had 3 non-white White Rangers even as recent as Ninja Steel. And what racial background was the Ninja Steel White Ranger? Black. The brand team accusing the writers of cultural appropriation over their belief that the original Robo-Rita mask design looked too Japanese is another example of hypocrisy, because the entire Power Rangers franchise is taking a Japanese series and repackaging it for an American audience. What does looking too Japanese mean? Who are the people making these decisions? Both the writers and the brand team share similar beliefs, but it seems like the brand team's beliefs are more extreme, which makes the writers question their decision-making. It's ironic, because that's how a lot of the general audience is looking at the writers. In my opinion, I think the writing room has a bunch of performative activists who think they're doing some sort of social justice, but really they're just feeding their own egos.
Just hopefully when Hasbro moves on with this reboot, they don't completely stifle the creativity of Jonathan Entwistle and what his team is putting together with budget and things like that. So
no, they will have to spend the money if they want it to succeed as a competition with other properties, as a young adult show on a streaming platform that is a flagship show. It can't give it the kids show resources. It'll have to be budgeted properly, and I can't imagine, Jenny Klein or Jonathan Entwistle working with an inadequate budget.
Yeah, that's what frightens me, because even though they may want this budget and what they script up may call for this budget, if Hasbro and Netflix don't approve it, they could walk away and, we get the PR statement of they parted ways by creative differences.
Yeah.
We hear that night and day, and that's what I don't want.
Yeah, that happens a lot in the entertainment industry for those kinds of reasons.
Hasbro cannot have their cake and eat it too. They cannot be stingy with money and still expect a product that'll compete with other shows that have proper budgets behind them. Without a proper budget, the producers will be limited with what they can do on the show. The lack of support from the company that hired you to lead their project is just a headache waiting to happen, and I would think that no producer wants to deal with that and have their reputation tarnished because they couldn't turn nothing into something. This is how you lose talent before a project even starts.
It's another criticism that I've read online is that the climax wasn't action-heavy enough, that there should have been a final battle, but I actually think that Morphin Master Z would have wiped the floor of the Rangers, to be honest.
I mean, he said fuck all the story. He blew all the fuck. He blew all the story.
That's true.
And the other thing we wanted to happen was that Zato would convince Morphin Master Z to step down, basically to save himself, which is what happened. So it became about manipulation, strategy, and cleverness rather than about brute force. Because I think on a brute force level, Morphin Master Z would always win, because he's got the power of all the Morphin Masters inside him. So what Zato did was very clever. And there's a lot of debate about whether Lord Zed would ever actually agree to submit in the way that he did. And I get that. But I think that there is a little bit of a coward in Zed, in that if his own life is threatened, when push comes to shove, he might take the easier way out.
I didn't mind the final battle going down the way it did. Even though I now know that budget and suit limitations were the reasons for not having an action-heavy final battle, I do like the way that Zato used his brain instead of his brawn to solve a problem. Also, narratively, The Rangers would have lost because Morphin Master Zed is a Morphin Master that can actually use all the powers the other Masters seem unable to access.
Can you talk about Ollie being evil, like the whole idea behind that? Yeah, because that's the best part of the show.
This was born out of the situation that when we were locking in the cast for Cosmic Fury, just after we'd finished filming Dino Fury, Kai Moya was the only actor who couldn't commit. He wasn't, because he had other work in the pipeline. He wasn't sure that he could come back to New Zealand to do Cosmic Fury. So we had to write Ollie in a way that Ollie could stay suited the entire season and played by a suit actor, with Kai voicing him from the States via ADR. So the only way that would work was if the character was separate from the other Rangers. And we thought, let's make him a villain, and let's because we did it in one episode in Dino Fury, and back then Rangers were only allowed to be evil for one episode, and they had to be cured within that episode. But all those kind of restrictions had been lifted. So by having Ollie evil and in Lord Zed's camp, meant that should Kai not be available, he could stay morphed and stay a suit actor, and be separate from the Rangers from a scheduling and shooting point of view. So it was a pragmatic thing.
My highlight from Ollie was when he threw the sword at Amelia's face. I was like, oh, he's not playing.
When he tried to shoot Fern right in the face?
Yes, he was not playing.
Equal rights, equal loves, bro.
Was it Ollie who blasted the hole through the middle of the scuttle?
Yes, he did. Yeah. Yes,
we would never have been able to get away with that on Nickelodeon. Like all the gory stuff with Fern blasting the scuttleworms in the cave, I thought was just fantastic, and we couldn't have done that in previous seasons.
I like evil Ollie, and I liked that his evilness extended to his actions, where he was being violent toward anyone deemed an enemy. This shows that he is a true threat, which raises the stakes for the Rangers because he's not holding back. When evil Ollie blasted a hole through the scuttleworm, I was genuinely surprised they showed that on camera with a close-up, because that is considered gory and graphic for the younger demographic, but I loved it.
What's up with the team cannon? Because you got these weapons, right? And it's not practical at all. Like you can't form that cannon with those weapons. Like how
no,
does
I
that come
know.
about?
Well, how's it come about? We were asked to do a combined blaster. And it's ironic because I got so much criticism for them not doing it in Once and Always, not using their combined weapon in Once and Always. And now all the criticism is about they go to all that trouble to make a combined weapon. It's pathetic, and the I think my track record with combined weapons is a definite F fail, and I will never be the one to get that right, sadly.
I didn't mind the Cosmic Blaster. I see some people complaining that the blaster isn't practical because the cosmic weapons cannot form the blaster in real life. This is a nitpick which is just ridiculous. There are actual problems within the show. The practicality of the cosmic blaster should not be one of them. The power blaster should have been in Once and Always. Now that's an actual issue. The most pivotal moment where forming the power blaster would have been perfect, and the writers dropped the ball. How did no one say anything?
Was there a reason that the monster from Q-Ranger that is like tentacle-like wasn't used?
A lot of those Q-Ranger monsters were rejected by Hasbro as being unsuitable for kids by the people who were in brand at the time we were building the show. Uh-huh. So they might be a little bit adult in the depiction of some aspects of the characters. Like some of the characters from earlier Power Rangers seasons would never have happened with that particular overview. I mean, I got notes about things like, the texture of the metal in Lord Zed's fortress looks too much like a torture chamber. Can you change it? Just really, really strange notes. But yeah, I mean, some of those Japanese monsters, particularly the female ones, are very busty and not, not considered, lots of cleavage, not considered suitable for kids. And some of them might be a bit phallic, not considered suitable for kids. So it's an example of the Japanese sensibility being quite different to what is perceived to be the American one in a kids show.
I understand not wanting to have busty characters, but roping in monsters with tentacles as sexual, because the tentacles can be seen as phallic, is ridiculous. I think someone in charge of making these decisions may have a fetish that they're projecting onto others, because I don't think the general audience equates tentacles to private parts. This may be the same person who said the evil fortress's metal texture is too much like a torture chamber. What does the texture of metal look like in a torture chamber? Again, this person may be into some fetish material, which is okay, but they should understand the general audience doesn't associate sexual things with tentacles and evil fortresses.
We're being told that, Q Ranger can't be adapted because there's too many Rangers and different things, but there's 10 Rangers that show up in Cosmic Fury.
The fundamental reason is that there was no desire or interest within Hasbro from a toy manufacturing point of view to use any of those designs. When I said there are too many Rangers, that was when we were talking about adapting Q Ranger for a full new season, which we could have done. But it's really about when you've got that number, I think it's 12 or 13 Ranger characters to support with story and script, it ends up being very once over lightly. And you can't tell stories about the characters in nearly as much depth as you can when there are fewer of them. But I was not interested in doing a full season, 44 episodes, with 13 Rangers. I just think it would have been unwieldy, and I don't think we'd been able to do any of them justice. So that was the reason. When I said there were too many Rangers, and I was asked that question a long time ago, I was talking about its adaptability as a full season, and it was the same time that I said that we'd be unlikely to do a season with cops and robbers because of Black Lives Matter and not having Rangers as criminals. It was that same conversation, which was years ago now, but people keep bringing it up again. But the main reason is there was no interest in, from a toy point of view, in those suits.
Dino Charge was able to pull off 10 Rangers, but every Ranger wasn't in every episode. I'm not sure if Q Ranger features all the Rangers in every episode, but if they do, it would be a harder task to tackle because the average Ranger team is 6 Rangers, so whoever adapts Q Ranger would have to fit twice the amount of storylines within the same time frame. The Q Ranger suits have more complex designs than the Cosmic Fury suits, so that was enough to discourage Hasbro from adapting that season since Hasbro uses toys to recoup their money from the show. Not considering to adapt Lupin Ranger versus Pat Ranger because of the Black Lives Matter movement is another questionable decision that makes me scratch my head. So are all cops and authority figures now considered bad guys? I believe the audience has the ability to separate real life from entertainment. To what extent should current events affect storylines within entertainment? Not wanting to have Rangers as criminals is also silly. There has been evil Rangers forever. Now, if he said he didn't want to have Rangers who are criminals being portrayed as the good guys, then I think that's a more reasonable answer.
Where did the inspiration for the name Cosmic Fury come from?
Oh God,
that was a Hasbro name. We always called it Dino Fury 3 in house because in our heads it was. It was a continuation. It was a season 3 of what we'd already established with Dino Fury. And it feels like that. It was always going to feel like that. But Netflix didn't want it to be a season 3. They wanted it to be a season 1 of something new. That's in terms of marketing and attracting new viewers or people who may not have seen Dino Fury. So the name had to change. And Hasbro brand came up with Cosmic Fury. And I think if you're going to change the name Cosmic Fury after Dino Fury is fine. It says that it's in space, and it also says that there's some continuity from the previous season.
I don't mind the name Cosmic Fury because it seems like a reasonable jump from Dino Fury. I think I prefer the name of this season to be Cosmic Fury so Dino Fury can remain its own season that ended as a more complete story. In my opinion, Cosmic Fury has its own vibe to it that differentiates it from Dino Fury. I understand why Netflix wanted to market Cosmic Fury as a new season instead of Season 3 of Dino Fury because people like things that are new. It's a classic marketing trick.
I absolutely love the kind of the LGBTI representation, Simon. And actually, it's funny because I was talking in another circle, Twitter chat about how like there's like a nice bookend moment between like the 90s and the kind of homophobic 90s, and now you're bringing in, these beautiful sort of lesbian couple in this new series, which I really love. And I was like, oh my god, this is amazing that you're doing this, and this is amazing. I wanted to ask you, like, in terms of creating that representation and that authenticity, is what was the process like of bringing like GLAD on to kind of help kind of create this authenticity? Because I know that was really important.
Well, we had one of the writers on the team was a lesbian writer who was very much a defender of Izzy and the Izzy Fern story, and the content was sent to the person at GLAD we were working with at the time, who would read and give feedback. We actually got very little feedback other than "this is great, keep doing what you're doing," but having that consultation meant that we felt safe in the authenticity of doing what we were doing, and yeah, so that's how that worked. On the disability story in Cosmic Fury with Harvey, we got a lot more script notes, script feedback, and it really meant that we were walking on eggshells a bit in terms of how we depicted the situation, because we weren't able to do anything negative. So we couldn't have people being very shocked or upset that he'd lost his arm. That's why there isn't a scene with Harvey and his parents, other than I'll explain everything later, I'm fine moment, because any person in their right mind would be really upset to find that their child had lost a limb. And we couldn't show people being upset because the message that we needed to send, or we had to send, was an overwhelmingly positive one about, yes, you will learn to live with a disability and life won't be the same, but it can be good. And that was the message we were trying to tell with the story. I've got off the subject of LGBTQI representation, but it is a similar situation. The GLAD involvement was minimal, but we did run everything involving Izzy and Fern past them. I mean, one of my regrets with Power Rangers finishing, or me finishing with Power Rangers, is that there are a lot of things that I would have loved to have done with the show that we never got the chance to do. I would love to have had a regular full-time gay male character. I'd love to have had a gay male relationship on the show. I'd have loved to have had a non-binary character. I'd love to have had a plus-size character.
Yes, the fluffies. I am here for
I'd love to have had a character with autism. There are so many. In terms of representation, there are so many people who have never had a front and center representation on Power Rangers. And given that the message of the show has always been anyone can be a ranger, I think it could have been explored in even more depth. I think Izzy and Fern was a tentative first step for something that could have become even more beautiful.
I love that. And I do actually really appreciate that from a disabled perspective. I actually watched the show last night, and when that did come up, I was very surprised, but I was kind of like, how you would have juggled the kind of target market with the kind of, that responsibility of showing kind of grief and loss.
Unfortunately, when trying to write a story that wants to show representation, writers will run into a dilemma which makes them choose who gets represented. Representation is supposed to be equal, but in reality there are too many groups to include. Each character would have to equally represent multiple groups. Then on top of that, each character would have to be given equal screen time and be of equal importance to make sure every group is equally represented. These requirements will make it harder for writers to make interesting characters because most likely every group will want to be represented in a positive light. If all the characters are perfect people all the time, they will lack personality and become boring. This may not please fans of the show because sometimes when trying to please everyone you will end up pleasing no one. If the writers reduce the amount of groups that make it into the story, that'll expose their own bias as to which groups are at the top of the hierarchy even though everyone is supposed to be equal. Simon said there was a lesbian writer who was a defender of the Izzy Fern story. This information shows why the characters that represent the LGBTQIA+ community have a lot of screen time, because one of the writers is in the same community and therefore has an influence over the story. Even though one of the writers is lesbian, Simon revealed that the writers go to GLAAD to get approval on how the story depicts Izzy and Fern. GLAAD had minimal intervention with the story because they felt that the representation of Izzy and Fern was adequate, which makes sense because, again, one of the writers is lesbian. This wasn't the same situation with Javi's depiction as the new disability representative. Simon states that working with the disability consultants was like walking on eggshells as they intervened with Javi's storyline a lot because they didn't want any negative depiction of Javi's experience after losing his arm, whether from him or the people around him, which I believe to be very unrealistic for a musician that just lost their dominant arm. If I was the writer, I would have just scrapped that storyline completely due to not being able to tell the story how it was intended. But the writers decided to cast aside their vision of Javi overcoming adversity to treating the loss of an arm like a paper cut, just to appease the consultants. This shows that it is possible that the prioritization of representation can have a negative effect on a story, as the writers couldn't use Javi's loss as a way to show danger, risk, or sadness. Representation is not bad. How the writers go about including representation is what can mess things up. Simon mentions that some of his regrets from the show is not having a regular, full-time gay male character in a gay-male relationship, a non-binary character, a plus-size character, or a character with autism be front and center on the show. He said these are ideas he would have liked to explore more in depth because the message of the show is that anyone can be a ranger. I feel like Simon's interpretation of the message is a bit misguided. It's like he's taking the message literally, which can be influencing the push for increased representation. There's nothing wrong with representation. I just feel that the writing room is prioritizing representation when they should be prioritizing making a good story. Simon already admitted that consultants have enough power to dictate how the storyline plays out. In theory, the more consultants added to the writing process, the more the storyline will change. The disability consultants didn't like the Javi arm loss storyline, regardless of Simon's intent, so it was altered, and the final product looked very awkward and poorly executed. Instances like these are why people say that representation brings down the quality of a story. If a writer is going to implement representation, it is important that the final product comes out very well so it'll dispel potential criticism.
I mean, something else I'd say about Power Rangers in my time on the show is that when the stories and characters are written, they're not assigned particular ethnicities. The ethnic makeup of the cast comes from the casting process. So actors are put together who will complement each other. But at the time of initial writing, they're all quite neutral in terms of their backgrounds. And I think, in future, it would be great to have more representation in the writing team of the different backgrounds of the characters who are being written for. And that's another area that I think could have been improved on with Power Rangers. I mean, with Cosmic Fury, because the budget hadn't been increased, our writing team was tiny. It was basically 3 people. I think it's essential today, if you're writing African-American characters or Chinese characters, to have access to lived experience on the writing side of things so that you can be authentic. And I think historically, with Power Rangers, that element has been brought by the actors who are playing those characters, and it's not necessarily in the writing.
Ion was a big thing for like myself and other Black fans because it's like he's the first, Black Gold Ranger. He's the first Black Sixth Ranger. So it was a big moment, for a lot of us, and a lot, myself and others feel like he felt kind of squandered, and he kind of exemplified various stereotypes and things that we kind of don't want to see from our characters, like and of course, like you said, having a writing room of only like 3 people, or not having like people of color who can actually write to these characters, it can become problematic, even if the people working on it don't have those intentions. But yeah, like that was one thing that stood out to me. But I really wasn't a fan of Ion in Dino Fury, but his whole thing in Cosmic Fury I really liked. Seeing that level of maturity from Ion after he came off as such a goofy and unserious character in Dino Fury, I really appreciate it.
The ethnicity of the actor playing the Ranger shouldn't matter because the character's story should be applicable to anyone playing the role. Actors should be picked based on how they portray the character, not because of their skin color. It's possible that the small writing team of 3 is probably the reason why the Zato controversy happened. It seems like the 3 writers were so laser-focused on Amelia that they didn't see what the story looked like to other parts of the audience. The writers keep preaching representation, yet it doesn't exist within their own team. I didn't notice Ion was the first Black 6th Ranger because that's not something I personally keep track of. What I did notice is how immature Ion was, especially for his age, and for someone who was a Ravkonian knight. I wasn't very fond of his character because some of his behavior was very off-putting. I like a more serious Ion.
Just backing up to what I said previously, I got no pushback from Hasbro at all on the Izzy Fern relationship story. They were 100% supportive. So I don't want anyone to think that Hasbro were at all negative or putting up obstacles or abstractions. I think Hasbro likes to see itself as being a very inclusive company, and so it should. And it was cherished and celebrated, that story, not just within the writers' room and the production, but within Hasbro as well. And I think they were very proud of the GLAAD award that the show got as a result of that. So, and when I say there are things that I would like to do if I'd had the chance in the future, I'm sure I would have been allowed to do some of them. But again, Izzy and Fern were just a toe in the water. I actually suspect with Jonathan Entwistle, looking at the content of his other shows, I think there'll be a whole lot of stuff in those shows that's new to Power Rangers along the lines of representation.
The way that Simon doubles back to clarify that Hasbro was very supportive of the LGBTQIA+ relationship makes me think their support is not genuine. When people make these kind of statements, it makes me feel like there's a financial incentive to support a group. Simon has made negative remarks toward the disability consultants and his experience working with them, and he didn't make any comment regarding Hasbro's support. This statement makes me believe that the show does have a hierarchy of the groups they want to represent, and clearly the LGBTQIA+ community are at the top. There's a LGBTQIA+ writer on the writing team. Production submits their work to an LGBTQIA+ organization to get approval of their portrayal of LGBTQIA+ characters, and the producer publicly expresses that the parent company is 100% supportive of the LGBTQIA+ community. Supporting the LGBTQIA+ community isn't a problem. It's the hypocrisy of the writers where they want to make it seem like everyone is equal when they clearly put more time and attention towards certain groups over others. It reminds me of the fake support marginalized and minority groups receive from corporations. Corporations seem to treat these groups as untapped markets in which they can exploit money from. The way the storyline in this season seems to focus on the LGBTQIA+ and female characters, I wouldn't be surprised if it was a directive from Hasbro for this season to try to appeal to those two demographics so the show could potentially get more views. Whether the direction the show went in is good or bad depends on how you look at the intentions behind the decisions.
Thanks for finally making a lot of my, 7-year-old dreams come true. I got to see a girl reject the fact that you have to wear a skirt to be a Power Ranger, which was amazing. I got to see a, high school aged girl in a relationship with another girl and balancing sports and life and everything else. And, it took 27 years, but I finally feel like I saw myself, my actual self in a Ranger. And I just kind of want to say thanks for that. And then, getting a female Red Ranger, something I never thought I would get to see a woman actually be the person leading the team. Man, it made all my dreams come true. So thank you.
I thought it was cool to see Izzy rip off the skirt, but there are at least 9 female Rangers before Cosmic Fury who did not wear skirts. It doesn't matter to me if a female Ranger has a skirt or not. But at the same time, I do recognize that I am a male, and the significance of ripping off a skirt means more to females, as historically females have been forced to wear skirts. How specific does a Ranger have to be written for a viewer to feel connected, or to see themselves in that character? I gravitated towards Zach and Billy because Zach dances and Billy is smart. From what I've been seeing on social media, A vocal minority of people claim they can't identify with or relate to a character unless the character mirrors their looks, life, or experience. I think this is a very limited way of thinking because everybody is different, and we usually connect with other people based off of one or two things that leads to us liking the person for who they are. Wanting characters to check certain boxes for you to see yourself in that character limits the amount of joy and entertainment you will get from a show. There has been multiple female Rangers who led the team and 2 female Red Rangers before Amelia. Not trying to discredit Cosmic Fury, but crediting them for things that already happened in other seasons is almost like erasing the contributions made by female Rangers prior to Cosmic Fury.
There's been a lot of kind of vitriol flying around the last few months, but I really have, since I've been in this job, listened to what you, the adult fan, are saying about the show. And, you know, the points that I've agreed with, Beck and Alvin and I have worked really hard to try and integrate. And that's been a big part of what my goal with the show is, to actually move it as strongly as possible towards something that I like and something that I think that the fans of the show will like, while still working for the core audience of kids, which ironically I know nothing about because they don't post on Twitter or Ranger Board, and there is no research that I have access to about what works or what doesn't work with 7 or 8 year olds who are the people that we're supposedly making the show for. It's been great to actually have the interaction with the fans that I've had, but now I'm no longer involved with the show. I will stay around, I think, for another week or so while Cosmic Fury is still being talked about. But then I think I will permanently leave Twitter because it's got increasingly toxic over the years, and it's not good for my blood pressure. And I don't need to keep the discourse going because I'm not working on the show anymore, and it takes a lot of time and energy. And, you know, part of it's my own ego wanting to get feedback, but I've never actually intended to upset or inflame or enrage fans of the show. I've always tried to be as upfront and honest as I can be. I've never deliberately misled people. I mean, I've made a few sarky remarks, but it's always been in response to people who've been incredibly rude, and I think I've managed to remain reasonably polite throughout the torrents of abuse that I've been enjoying over recent months. Anyway, rant over. Next question, please.
Even though I think he partly brought it onto himself, I do feel bad for Simon, as he became a target to the toxic part of the fan base who stay online all day spewing negativity. It's almost no point of trying to appease this part of the community because there's no satisfying them. Whoever's at the top making decisions on the direction of the show has to realize that today's kids are not interested in Power Rangers. It's like Hasbro is trying to recreate the phenomenon that once was, but that's not going to happen using the old formula because the audience has changed. I believe that the so-called push for representation is a dirty corporate trick to emotionally manipulate minority groups into watching the show instead of focusing on making a higher quality product with a storyline that can appeal to most people. I feel like Simon's bruised ego and snarky comments didn't do him any favors with the fan base, but I appreciate him for trying to be open about the behind-the-scenes happenings and for giving us an insight into what was happening with production and corporate, even if he only disclosed this information to take the heat off of him.
I essentially appreciate everything about Ion. As a fan of both PR and Sentai for a long time, I've always been a fan of Six Rangers. So to finally have a Six Ranger that looks like me and my future kids, man, that's crazy.
I am a fan of Sixth Rangers, and I would like the tradition to continue. A character doesn't have to look like me for me to like them. I wasn't even aware that Ion was the first black Sixth Ranger and the first black Gold Ranger because I'm not focused on the color of the Ranger's skin. I'm focused on the content of their character. I didn't like Ion until he matured. He doesn't get a pass just because we're the same skin color, and he is not automatically in my favor because we look alike.
Thank you, everyone, for listening and for the great questions and for sticking with Power Rangers and enjoying whatever you did enjoy about Cosmic Fury. And be assured, it came from a good place and was made with heart and care and love. So thank you, everyone.
I have a personal bias against companies who parade around characters who are a part of a marginalized or minority group because I believe companies fake support for groups as long as it's financially beneficial. I don't think corporations have a problem with emotionally manipulating people into buying their products. When Hasbro was plastering Izzy everywhere, I was very skeptical about their intentions, especially during Pride Month when they coincidentally released Pride-themed Power Ranger merchandise. I see similar behavior when it comes to Amelia being the new Red Ranger. I feel like the intent isn't really to support women, but to tap into the female demographic as the Power Rangers audience heavily skews toward males. If this is what Hasbro has to resort to in order to make Power Rangers financially viable enough to continue supporting them, then we as fans have to deal with a catch-22 situation. Do we let corporate turn the show into a very sanitized, ad-friendly, soulless version of itself, or do we just let the show end at Cosmic Fury because the current fans cannot financially sustain the franchise? I appreciate Simon for answering questions. I wish his experience working with the franchise would have been a better one. I also wish that he could have utilized true fans of the franchise who could have helped him craft a storyline that would resonate with the majority of Ranger fans. We find out that a lot of the backlash this season received was due to decisions being made by Hasbro. Unfortunately, Simon and the production team were already fighting a losing battle as Season 30 was not going to happen until Netflix stepped in, but even so, they only agreed to cover 10 episodes, which was more than Hasbro was willing to do. Hasbro made certain design decisions to the suits and weapons, so they could spend less money making Cosmic Fury toys, which never came out, so the suit changes and the backlash it got was all for nothing. This situation seems like corporate was focused on trying to optimize this season to generate money, but that decision led to changes in the show which made the audience criticize the show's direction. Based on Hasbro's actions, they don't have faith that Power Rangers will turn a profit, so they are withdrawing support from the show. The only way to send a message to Hasbro that they should invest more resources into Power Rangers is if the fans were to buy a lot of Power Ranger products to show that there is still a market for Power Rangers in this modern era. I would like to see Power Rangers continue, especially if it was given a revitalization the way Cobra Kai has gotten. I believe Power Rangers still has potential, but the people in charge have to realize that they have to tweak the show to apply to an older audience, not kids. Kids do not have money, and kids no longer play with toys, so Hasbro needs to let that go. Corporate is out of touch with the target audience and is doing themselves a disservice by not listening to the people who actually watch the show. When it comes to Power Rangers, if Hasbro continues to do what they do, then they will continue to get what they always got, which is nothing. This video is not a condemnation of any minority or marginalized group or the general idea of representation. It's a condemnation of corporate hypocrisy and how they are more than willing to emotionally manipulate minority and marginalized groups just to make a quick buck. I believe that if companies were really supportive of such groups, they would announce their support by donating to a cause or an organization, not by selling merch. I believe these companies parade around their token characters like props when it's trendy, but drop them as soon as the trend dies down. I feel bad for the writers because they probably had good intentions when trying to include representation, but unfortunately, they are not as informed as they would like to think they are. Their effort is reminiscent of people who are outside of a group, but still want to participate anyway instead of accepting that they may need to sit this one out. My opinions are not the end-all be-all of opinions. I could also be participating in the hypocrisy as I may be misinformed or have a narrow view on certain situations. My opinion can change as my experiences shape how I view the world.
Thank you for watching another episode of Tales from the Grid, and until next time, have a good one.